For my final sociology report, I wanted to talk about parasocial relationships and how they affect athletes and fans, since fandom and cultural studies is an area of sociology that really interests me in particular. The term parasocial and our understanding of what a parasocial relationship is was first coined in 1956 by sociologists R. Richard Wall and Donald Horton. They defined parasocial relationships as a relationship wherein Party A is completely disconnected from Party B. Party A feels as though they have a very strong and significant relationship with Party B based off of their observations of this party in media and in other frameworks. However, they don't actually know each other in person, and there's no actual basis for this relationship. I personally am more so involved in music, as you can probably see from my shirt, and pop culture, so movies, things like that. And so I see this a lot with singers, celebrities, movie stars, and what is more perceived as typical fandom as defined by cultural studies. Now, of course, this all has to relate back to sport. As we discussed in class, cultural studies generally neglects sport as something that should be studied under the umbrella of fandom, because sports fans and their cultures have been very much mainstreamed. This is likely because sports typically involves men, and other types of fandom, like music or getting really into certain TV shows, things like that, generally involve women, particularly younger women. A lot of the fan practices that we recognize, such as fan fiction, originated with housewives in the 1960s who were really obsessed with Star Trek, which I think is iconic. When I was researching for this, I found a Reddit thread that was all about someone saying, I think that the relationship that people have with athletes is problematic. I think that we need to reevaluate the parasocial culture that exists in sports. And pretty much all of the comments were negative and saying that parasocial relationships don't exist in sport. Sports fans are not exempt, though. They still demonstrate a lot of problematic behaviors, as we have learned over the course of this class. This may be due to systemic reasons that are within the world of sports, as well as a lot of factors that are just ingrained in our society. One of the easiest ways to find weird parasocial abuse is just to go to the social media accounts of any professional sports league and look for a picture of a woman. So I'm going to do a fun exercise now where I go to a social media account and I do that exact thing. Okay, it has taken me however many seconds that was. I found a Women in Hockey Night post from the Seattle Kraken, and there are people in the comments deriding the Seattle Kraken for stating this woman's pronouns, calling them woke fools, saying, tell me you work in Seattle without telling me you work in Seattle. Moving on, though, from my social media experiment, there's also a lot more concrete examples of online abuse being a major problem for athletes, especially identity-based abuse. During the 2021 Euro Cup finals between Italy and England, the final three penalty shooters were all black men. Now, England would go on to lose that game on penalty shots. And rather than being normal about this, the fans kind of flew into a rage and got so racially abusive, hurling slurs and really just horrible things at these young men, like things I can't even really articulate or comprehend. Instead of not doing that, they got to a point where the prime minister had to intervene, which was crazy. If you're interested in learning anything more about this situation and the way that white fans feel entitled to black players' bodies, you should definitely check out the article 3 years on from Wembley, I Still Fear for England's Black Penalty Takers from The Guardian. It's a really excellent piece of journalism, and I think it articulates this in ways that I obviously cannot. Now, I've mostly talked about online abuse, people saying weird and creepy things to female and LGBT players, people using racial slurs and stereotypes in comment sections. So an appropriate response from many people might just be, well, why don't you log off? Go touch grass. This is such a terminally online conversation. But we've seen that fans are empowered to take this off the internet anyways. It doesn't matter if an athlete decides to delete their Instagram or their Twitter or whatever. The fans will find a way to come get them. And that's because of the semi-public nature of sports games in general. You do have access to these athletes' bodies, and that is kind of a terrifying experience. At sports games, fans are clearly visible in the stands, and, you're encouraged to engage with the athletes. A lot of people bring signs, which most of the time are pretty harmless. They're a lot of fun, go Jays go and whatever. But other times they do get borderline creepy. I found some articles all about, top 10 weirdest signs fans have brought. And these are in full view of the players, especially at hockey games when players are frequently shoved right against the boards into screaming fans. There's one I found that was saying really gross things about Sidney Crosby and his sexuality, propositioning him for sex while he's at his job, which I know that he's a celebrity and there is a power imbalance, but it is still creepy to show up at somebody's workplace and proposition them for sex. In any other work environment, that would be totally unacceptable. And finally, we have probably the most unignorable instance yet, where I guess even if someone has a sign, you can train yourself not to look at it. But during last year's World Series, fans were so obsessed with being the protagonist of their own story, or the protagonists of the game, that they grabbed Mookie Betts' arm and they grabbed the ball from him while he was trying to catch it. And to watch the clip back, it's insane. This isn't just weird or creepy, which have been my criticisms of parasocial relationships thus far. This is actually interfering with the game. It makes me question how much of a fan you really are. I don't care what jersey you're wearing, you come to this game, you pay to come to this game because you must have some level of respect for the athletes who are playing there. But clearly, the fans who felt so entitled as to grab the ball from a player don't feel this way. In their minds, they have some sort of relationship with Mookie Betts and the wider MLB that whispers to them that they are the exception, that they are allowed to interfere. So there are a lot of questions left. Why are fans like this in general? Well, as I said at the beginning, there are definitely systemic issues in our wider society. We're in, racism, homophobia, misogyny, sexism. All of those things are still very much tolerated, and challenging them is an ongoing struggle in society. But I think that another problem is actually from sports itself. Fans are encouraged to interact with athletes. Trying to find those posts on social media was, not hard, you just look for a picture of a woman. But it was difficult because you're wading through such a mountain of content. So really, what can we do about this? I wish I had an answer. Even looking to pop culture to see how they've dealt with parasocial relationships, it doesn't seem to be getting much better. People are more online than ever, more addicted to their phones, and with algorithms catering to you, with media telling you that it's up to you to hustle and get in that grind set to make your life happen, people are more obsessed with being the main character of life than ever. People are narcissistic. They want to be the center of attention. And you could point at the internet, but I'm going to go even further and point at neoliberalism and wider society. We've lost a sense of collectivism, and we've lost the sense that, other people are just like us. The NCAA recently released the findings of a report that studied online engagement with their athletes, and they found that out of 72,000 comments that they filtered through, 5,000 of them were abusive in nature, which is quite a lot. In doing this, though, they were able to learn more about the nature of abuse that is slung at athletes. And they're now developing moderation strategies in their online communities. So this might be the way to go. If people can't learn to behave themselves online and then they bring this behavior into the real world, then we might just have to start policing things more heavily, which, yes, is difficult, but that's what we have to do. It's up to each and every one of us to hold both ourselves and our neighbor accountable. And I think that is the only way that we will see even a small positive change in parasocial relationships with athletes.